are drafting our biographies about our famous Hoosiers. In this tutorial, I'm going to talk about how do we summarize all the information that we've shared so far in this last section, which is entitled Why We Should Remember Famous Hoosier. Now that title for this slide sounds a little chunky because we need to replace the phrase famous Hoosier with the name of our famous Hoosier. And in my case, that's Steve McQueen. And that rolls off the tongue a little bit better. Why we should remember Steve McQueen. Now, there are three questions that we need to answer here. What makes the famous Hoosier the first, best, or most at something? Describe an award, record achieved, or distinction that the famous Hoosier earned, and describe why the famous Hoosier should be remembered today. Now, I want to go back and consult my graphic organizer, especially to answer that first question, first, best, or most. It says, describe how your famous Hoosier was the first to do something in his or her career, was the best at doing something in his or her career, or had the most of something in his or her career. So these are questions that help make a distinction between your famous Hoosier topic and other people in his or her career. For example, Neil Armstrong was not the first astronaut, but he was the first person on Earth to set foot on the moon. So that's a big distinction that you would use to describe Neil Armstrong. So Steve McQueen was not the only actor acting in the 1960s and 70s, but this fact here says by 1974, at the height of fame, McQueen became the highest paid movie star in the world. That doesn't necessarily make him the best, but he was such a commodity, meaning that so many people liked his movies. If you were a producer or a director and you wanted Steve McQueen to star in your movie, you had to shell out the big bucks. So that was important. And in part, his fame stemmed from the fact that he was very popular and well respected, because one of the things that he achieved over his lifetime was several award nominations for his acting, including an Academy Award or Oscar nomination and several Golden Globe awards or nominations. So let's go back to this section right here. And to make these video tutorials a little bit more efficient, I already took the time to type out what I wanted to say. I'm just going to copy and paste it there. Okay, so I did a little work behind the scenes before I started filming. Here's my paragraph. Steve McQueen was a famous Hoosier because, you want to link that phrase with the word because of his popularity as a film and television actor. In 1974, at the height of his fame, he was the highest paid actor in the world. McQueen was nominated for Best Actor honors both from the Academy Awards and the Golden Globes for his films The Sand Pebbles, Love with the Proper Stranger, The Reivers, and Papillon. Steve McQueen will be remembered as a talented actor who was the definition of cool. Now, this summary, why we should remember Steve McQueen, is going to mirror or hit upon some of the same things that we talked about in the introduction. They're going to be like two bookends. When we talk about building a whopper of a paragraph, the top and bottom bun kind of hold all the fillings of that whopper together. So the introduction and the conclusion are going to sound a little similar. Steve McQueen is a famous Hoosier because he was a popular film and television actor. I mentioned that in my summary, okay? That's okay that we are being repetitive in this instance. When we are drawing our writing to a close, sometimes we need to point things out again just to kind of drive that point home, okay? Now that is our summary. Now there's another part to our biography, and that is this text feature, the timeline of important events. In most historical texts, you're going to see a timeline that kind of breaks down the important events in a person's life or the important events in a time period that makes it easy for the reader to digest. And that's what this timeline is going to do. It has two parts. There's this column on the left that has a description of an event, and then the column on the right with the zeros and slashes, this is where we're going to put the date. Okay? And the first event in any person's life story is when they were born. Now, all the information you need to create your timeline is now, or should be, in your slideshow. So for example, I want to go to my beginning page where it talks about where and when he was born. Steve McQueen was born in Beech Grove, Indiana on March 24th, 1930. And so I'm going to go here to my timeline where it says famous Hoosier. You're going to change that to the name of your famous Hoosier. So Steve McQueen is born in, and since he's a famous Hoosier, most of us will be writing a city in Indiana, Beech Grove, Indiana, and he was born on March 24th, 1930. So I'm going to use numbers here. So March is the third month of the year, followed by the day, 24, and then the 4 zeros represent the calendar year, 1930. Okay, now there will be some events that you may or may not know the exact day that it happened. All you know maybe could be the year, okay, or maybe the month and year, and that's okay. As long as there's at least one indication about when something happened in this right column, that's fine, okay? Here's the next category. Name at least one important event that happened during the famous Hoosier's childhood. There's a lot to pick from, but I think the one thing I would put here is the fact that he spent a lot of time living with his great-granduncle Claude in Slater, Missouri. And this is actually a range of years. Okay, so I'm going to fill that out like this. Okay, so we'll say spent many years living with his great uncle Claude in Slater, Missouri. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a range of years. So that'd be 1933 through 1942. And again, I don't know the exact day that he first moved in with his great-granduncle, but I do know it was in 1933. So that gives us a time frame. Okay, and that's how I'll fill out this timeline. I'm just going to ask myself these questions. Name at least one important event that happened to the famous Hoosier as an adult before the famous Hoosier became famous. Well, again, there were a lot of things that happened to Steve McQueen growing up, but I might say that joining the Marines was an important step in his childhood or his transition to becoming an adult. So we'll just say served in the United States Marine Corps. And again, I don't know the exact dates when he enlisted and when he was discharged, but I know the years. It was 1947 through 1950. Okay, and that's how I will fill this in. Now, the last event in our timeline is going to be one of two things. Is that person dead, and when did that person die? Or something that they're doing currently in, say, 2020. Okay, so if your famous Hoosier is still alive, do not say has not died yet. Okay, you can replace this fact with something that they're doing currently. So if your famous Hoosier is a retired Olympic gymnast, maybe they own a gymnasium where they're training future Olympic gym stars. Or maybe they switched careers, are now a lawyer or a doctor. So you just need to state what that person's doing today if they are still alive. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. Future tutorial videos will come along. Otherwise, continue to write. Thanks.